So I'm going to have you take out your Shakespeare set of notes, but right where the little head of Shakespeare's at. Okay? And we're going to just very quickly review our Elizabethan era notes. So I have some random pictures here. And at your tables, just can you remember what they all are? Hopefully you can see. This is a pot with food in it, gloves, of course. There's a little dog right here. Flowers, of course, cats and dogs up there. Bread. There's a canopy. This is a bed. Okay? And there's a slice of bacon. So talk at your table.
And then flowers that carry around. I couldn't feel the stuff.
I know. Micah, give me one thing.
The upper crust is bread.
Okay, and it means, what does it mean if you're part of the upper crust?
Oh, you're the higher.
And we don't, I can't find a picture, so remember they sliced the bread. I gotta take a picture so I have it. Okay, all right, Noah.
Train cat and dogs.
Yep, because the roof was that flesh kind of thing, yep. All right, let's see. Matt, you ever heard? Pick something.
Gloves.
You want to? Remember, they don't wipe their hands with the glove. It's with the hand, and then you put the glove on, which to me is like, okay. Okay, Cammy. Yeah, so that we carried them. So we started the tradition of carrying flowers when we got married because it covered our stench. Okay, Karen. Okay, and then remember, the bubonic plague came from fleas. So the fact that you carried a dog around all the time to get rid of fleas, you were basically keeping the bubonic plague near you. Okay? All right, Lexi. Yep. And chewing the fat. Okay? Isaiah. Yeah, I can't say it any clearer than that. They didn't use soap. Okay? Drew. Good boy.
Canopy beds.
Okay. Your table is getting a bit hard. Because
of dirt floors. Or no, thatch roof. Thatch roof.
So why did you want something over you when you slept?
Then it's like, what if the poop?
We sleep with our mouths open. We don't want that. All right, for some reason nobody likes this one. Hannah? Yeah, or for however long, and I just got gross at the end. All right, so good job. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to also talk a little bit about the Renaissance, and so we're going to be filling in, hold on, let me put my stuff back. At least I kept talking. All right, so this is actually a picture of the Renaissance, and of that time period. And the Renaissance was a time period that began in about the 1300s or the 14th century in Italy. And this was a time when intellectual activity flourishes. So you remember how I talked about how there were grave robbers?
Yeah.
And they were, dead bodies were really worth a lot of money. Well, why do you think that was? Why was everybody digging up dead bodies? So who was paying for dead bodies? Medical advances, believe it or not. They were opening up bodies to see how our bodies worked or how our innards worked. The only problem is we were dead. So you don't get to really see how the body works because it's a dead body, okay? And remember that the Bubonic Plague was going on, and they're trying to figure out why it was happening. So intellectual activity was flourishing. So we had people that were trying to study the human body, sailing, all kinds of things were going on and during that time. Science, commerce, philosophy, the arts, all of that just exploded during the 1300s all the way to the 1500s, because remember, he lived in the 1500s and he died in the early 1600s. So this is about 300 years of just intellectual activity where people are just, this is the Mozarts and the Beethovens and the Da Vinci's and Galileo and studying gravity and Da Vinci came up with the first helicopter design. It's phenomenal. Okay? So all of a sudden there's this kind of switch too where people are starting to think about themselves as an individual, that they have choices, that I don't have to live this way, or I don't have to be a farmer just because my dad is a farmer or whatever. And it peaked during Queen Elizabeth's reign, and that's why it's called the Elizabethan Age. So we're talking, it started in Italy around the 1300s or the 14th century, and it just kept going. And Shakespeare lived during this time period. So a little bit about Queen Elizabeth. We have a Queen Elizabeth right now. She's named after her. She is the last in line of what is called the Tudor family, because Queen Elizabeth today is of the Windsor family. She had a grandfather that was called King Henry VII, and he's the one that kind of stabilized England. But then she had a crazy dad. His name was Henry VIII. What do you know about King Henry VIII? He had a lot of wives. Why did he keep killing his wives? Well, he wanted to run around on them, but they wouldn't give him his sons. So what about biology? Did King Henry VIII not understand? Women do not control the sex or gender of their babies. It is the men. But he kept killing his wives because they didn't have any sons. And they kept not having any sons. He had one son, and that son actually was mentally challenged. And so King Henry VIII, that was her dad. Okay? It is actually really surprising that she lived to adulthood, because he didn't always do that with all of his children. Okay? But she established prosperity, and she supported the arts, and she made sure things like poets and painters and sculptors and musicians and architects, that they could flourish. And that's what Shakespeare lived in, is at this time of when they were encouraging the arts. And so then he wrote during this time. What are you doing? We're going to find out what it's doing. Please wait, you know. I have no idea what this is, so we're going to just move on. All right, let me go back. So let's take a look at what we have. Are you able to fill in over by next to Queen Elizabeth? Take a moment. I think that's what that was supposed to do. Talk at your tables and fill in those blanks. Hopefully I said the things that I didn't call this. started in what century? 14th century, which is the 1300s. I don't know. I always put that in there. So, and it started in Italy. And if you think about, I'm sorry, don't laugh at me, but if you think about the Mutant Ninja Turtles, that's the Renaissance, because you got Donatello, you got Michelangelo, you got Leonardo, and then you have Raphael. Okay? Yes, I know all of the turtles' names. Okay? That's because they were great artists and scientists of Italy. Okay? The next blank that you should have is a little bit about Queen Elizabeth. She's descended from what is called the Tudor family, Tudor, not Tutor. And right now it's the Windsor family that's in power. And her grandfather was Henry VII. The V is a 5, 7th. And he's the one that kind of stopped them from infighting and bringing it all together. And her father was King Henry VIII. And she was a very strong leader, and she ruled until the current Queen Elizabeth. She ruled the longest. But now the new Queen Elizabeth has ruled even longer than that. Okay? What? Queen Elizabeth, this one? Yeah. The current one? Isn't she just celebrating her 70th year in rule? 7th? Yeah, she's... Because they're celebrating that this year. $70 and 59 days. They have it actually coming. So she's the longest ruling monarch ever. Yeah, she's in her 80s. All right, so a little bit about what we have to kind of take into play with us when it comes to how the play is going to work. There are no curtains, no lighting, and no scenery. Okay, so that's the first blank that you have. Okay, there are props, however, there are costumes and sound effects. Okay, so and the dialogue. That's the way that the audience could see what is happening. So they're not miming like what we do in large group speech. They actually get to have a sword. And their costumes, like, oh my goodness, their costumes are extremely elaborate. But they were also colors. They kind of color-coded them. So, for example, if you are to have a young lover, if you're dressed in yellow, guess what color the guy is going to have? Probably yellow. And so the audience could quickly put together. Actually, yellow was something that was quite common for Romeo and Juliet. So their costumes were really elaborate, but their costumes also told the audience, gave them some clues. Now think about that. That followed us all the way to old Western times. You knew the good guy wore a white hat and the bad guy wore a black hat. And so we always had that. They were great at sound effects. They had trapdoors underneath, and they would do magnificent sound effects. So if there was thunder, they had sheets of metal that they would make the sound with, and the wind. So they were fantastic at giving the audience something that they could kind of envelop. However, there's no sets on the stage. There was no like Addams Family set at all. It was a blank stage. And then their dialogue told them what was going on and be like, hark, here comes so-and-so. And they would literally kind of tell us what we were supposed to see. One of the things that is kind of hard for people to understand is that there were no women on the stage. Okay? Women on stage were seen as immoral. So the only people that were on the stage were all guys. And so young boys were trained very extensively to play the women's parts. So Juliet probably was played by a 13, 14-year-old guy. Now, before you kind of go, there are not a lot of love scenes in it because Shakespeare knew this. So you probably have no idea much about Romeo and Juliet, but you do know that there's a famous balcony scene, right? Juliet's up here, Romeo's down here. Well, why do you think that is? Well, because Romeo up here is a guy. So they're not going to put them, like, in a bedroom together. Okay? Because they just didn't do that. Women were not allowed on stage because it was seen as not a very reputable job to be an actor or an actress. So what the young boys did is that they got their start in theater playing the ladies' roles, and then gradually they went and moved up and got the men's roles. So it was not uncommon for a young man, before his voice changed. If his voice changed, then he didn't play the girl anymore. But he played the lady, and then usually once the voice changed, then he would turn around and probably play Romeo, because who else would know Romeo's lines as well as Juliet? Okay? Also, women did not have big roles in Shakespeare's plays, and that makes sense. Why? Because he lived in a male-dominated society. So all of the plays are going to kind of be from the perspective of a male, because that's the way society was. It wasn't, now, are there plays where women are important? Absolutely. And he was a progressive in that way. But for the most part, most of the plays are pretty male-dominated. Okay? So, we talked a little bit about this earlier. So Lord Chamberlain's men eventually turns into the King's men. Remember, yes, right? We talked about Lord Chamberlain, and it turned into the King's men and the Queen's men. Okay, so they built the globe, and the globe is an octagon building that Shakespeare built, and then it burned down, and then they built it again. And let's see if I can find a picture of it while you guys write that down. It's an oval-looking building. There, that's a good picture. Oh, sorry, I thought I had unfreeze. So it's an oval-looking building, and it was open at the top for obvious reasons. Why wouldn't they close it in the top? Well, the stink might be true, but the lights. So the plays were always during the day, and he wrote at night. So it's kind of reverse of what we have today, where we think we go to the theater at night. And no, they went to the theater during the day, and then they wrote or partied at night. Okay? So, here's the thing, is that theater was the one place where everybody could kind of go and commingle. So you had the rich could go, but also the poor could go. And as poor as people were, they saved up their money and went to the theater. So if you were dirt poor, why would you save your money to go to the theater? Okay? And when your life sucks, you might want to have something that takes your mind off of it, right? If everybody around you is dying of the Bubonic Plague, let me take a couple of shillings and go somewhere where I'm not going to have to think about it. Okay? Because regardless, the theater interested all classes of people. Okay? It was the action, the poetic speeches. His stories are actually pretty fast-paced. Romeo and Juliet, from the time that Juliet meets Romeo until the time that they die, I'm not giving anything away because the first 12 lines tell you what happened, is 3 days. They meet, they fall in love, they get married, they die, all in 3 days. Okay? All right? But the thing is that people bought into it because his stories were so well written. So the theater was not a rich man's game. Now people would say today theater is a rich man's game because tickets are really expensive. Okay? For our tickets I bought one set of tickets for us out in New York. We're going to see The Lion King. One ticket is $148. And that is not like front row seats, guys. If you want to sit on the aisle in the front row for Lion King, they're around. Well, Hamilton right now is between $300 and $500 a seat. Not front row. That's like standing behind a pole. No lie. Craig and I went to Hamilton because he knew how bad I wanted to go, and our tickets were $110, and I literally was in the very, very last seat, last row, back against the wall at the Orpheum in Omaha. and that ticket was $110. They don't. And that's the argument, is that theater has priced its way out of like average people being able to go. Okay? But I will say this. Last time we went to New York, I couldn't even afford tickets to the Lion King because they were between $200 and $300. So they're like 50% off right now. And that's because of the pandemic, is that they need to get audience back in the seats.
Do you think we'll go to a second show?
Well, we're waiting until April 30th. I bought medieval tickets, but if April 30th they have lifted the show me your vaccine card thing, then I'm going to do another show. So.
Any ideas?
No, I'm going to wait until we see what's open and which show is going to be a butt and which one's not. So. All right, so here's the globe. Okay. So believe it or not, the globe, so at the bottom of the first page, the globe held around 3,000 spectators. Can you imagine doing a play for 3,000 spectators? Here's the other thing, no mics. Yeah, no microphones. Okay, so wait, I know you guys, all right, I'll let you guys fill this in, and then I will talk about things. Okay, so we'll start out with, okay, so let's do number one, the inner balconies. So that's the first section. These balconies right here are probably where the wealthier sat, because you really kind of don't want to be down here. Okay. All right. So the raised platform is the stage, so obviously it's up, right? Okay. Do you guys remember from last year when we talked about theater that the stage was raised, so it was like this? So everybody remember that? Remember, now we do that to the audience, but back then they did it then. So this stage actually is going at a slant, okay? The courtyard here is just like what we have. It's like a lobby, okay? They could sell peanuts and stuff there. But the pit is where all the lower class people went. So the ones that paid the shillings. Okay. In case I haven't sufficiently grossed you out, there's no indoor bathrooms.
Nepal. Oh, come on.
And underwear hadn't been invented yet. No.
Just pooped up and down.
Pretty much. The guys would just drop a flat, or the ladies would, yeah. Okay, so I'm going to let you guys fill in those blanks. Yep. Eventually Shakespeare banned that, and then they had outdoor toilets, which their outdoor toilet was basically a trench. And then we just went into the trench. So. I told you, this is like my favorite part, because it's like because it's hard for us to wrap our minds around that if you went back into that time. I don't know about you, but I'm like, yep, no, couldn't do it. So.
Little Rock Shuttle existed. Little Rock Shuttle.
All right, the last thing that we're going to get to is Shakespeare's impact. Okay? He is a master of dramatic language. He literally changed the way plays and theater were done. Before, they were seen as something horrific, anti-God, if you will. And he made it a good thing to go to the theater, despite the fact that they didn't have bathrooms. He is the most quoted writer in the English language. Okay? Now, the only reason I can say that above the Bible is because the Bible wasn't written in English first. The Bible was written in Hebrew and Arabic first. Okay? The most quoted book in the world is the Bible. Shakespeare's number 2. Okay? But he's number 1 when it comes to English. He contributed more words and phrases to the English language than any other single individual. And we kind of talked about that. Phrases that, going on a wild goose chase, or a spotless reputation, or I'm not going to budge an inch, or things that come full circle. All of those are phrases that came from Shakespeare. He influenced thousands of early writers. Okay? And he influenced the theater and changed people's perception of theater. I have one more blank, couple more blanks. Two more. Okay, almost done. Sorry, I know I'm making your hands hurt. Okay? What I mean by the illumination of the human experience is he took things like love and he gave it a whole new dimension. I know it's hard to believe that people fell in love before the 1500s, I understand that. But he gave this kind of like romantic notion of can we fall in love at first sight. He had just great stories. Romeo and Juliet, Othello, Hamlet, Macbeth, they're just good stories. And characters that people believe almost lived. Again, Romeo, Juliet, Othello, Macbeth, Hamlet, Lady Macbeth, crazy lady, Ophelia, played very well by Brandon Henderson. And the ability to just kind of turn a phrase, which I feel like I'm repeating, but he was such a wordsmith. Alright, so I promise you won't have such writer's cramps tomorrow. But tomorrow what we're going to do is I'm going to hand out the books. Okay? So this is where our start of where you guys are going to read on your own. Because I'm not going to, the 10 minutes of class is not, because most of the time, if not, I'm not going to say all, because as soon as I say all, then I'm going to be wrong. But most of the time, you're not going to have any homework in here other than read your independent book. Okay? So it'll be a lot of, I'll just take page numbers. Okay?